Welcome to today's edition of the Men's Room. I'm really excited about today's topic. And before we begin, I wanted to share that if you're new to our show, we want you to know a little bit about why we're here and what we do. And so the Men's Room was really created as a space for men to feel safe expressing their emotions in a vulnerable way. It is a place where men can come to be seen, heard, and acknowledged without feeling judged or afraid to show sides of themselves that may be different than society's expectations. We aim to educate, inspire, empower, and advocate. Please note that we are not licensed tech or clinicians, and that we express views and opinions based on our individual experiences. Our stories are meant to inspire others and do not replace medical advice or professional guidance. I am Linda Tilson, a men's empowerment advocate from a woman's perspective. And today I've got special guest, Dennis Gillan, and he is the executive director and speaker. Dennis is going to be here today to share his story while we have a discussion with the ways that men can find fulfillment when staying connected to the game of life. And so what better way to start off than to have Dennis jump right in?
Well, Linda, thank you for having me. And you said it right there. Well, staying connected in the game of life. I'm going to shorten that down a little bit. How about staying in the game of life? That's what I do. As you well know by your invitation, I do suicide prevention work. And so when I found out about you, I was like, wow, that's where I want to go, because men are the worst offenders when it comes to suicide. 80% of all suicides in the United States are guys, are dudes. And unfortunately, I have two of those guys. My older brother, Mark, back in 1983, while I was in college, battled depression for years. And he took his life. He died by suicide. And if we were to stop right there, the story would be sad enough, because one is too many. And if you see my head turn, because I'm looking at provisional data on another screen here, the provisional data for 2022 in the United States says we lost 49,449 folks. Let's round up 50,000 folks to suicide, because I think it's woefully underreported. So one is too many. And then 11 years after we lost Mark, and I'm one of 5 kids in this family. We started out in a little town called Valley Cottage, New York. I was at college when Mark died. I went to West Virginia University and graduated, which was a shocker. After Mark died, I was drinking heavily and all that other fun stuff that comes with dealing with the trauma in a negative way. And 11 years after we lost Mark, I lost my younger brother to suicide. That's the two. And his name is Matthew. And I even said to that, Linda, his name was Matthew. His name is Matthew. I hate using it past tense. We lost Mark and Matthew to suicide. And after years of remaining silent, doing what dudes do, I went into my man cave. And life came at me. There were some joyful moments. I started a family and I got wrapped up in that. I have 2 boys. You see the irony there. And you lose 2, you get 2, all even. I have 2 wonderful sons. I was raised in that family, and I didn't even want to do suicide prevention work. I didn't want to talk about it. People would say, Dennis, how many people in your family? I would say 3. I have 2 sisters. They're back in New York, and everything's fine. I would never mention the boys. I would never mention Mark and Matthew, and I couldn't. I wasn't in a place where I can talk about it. I couldn't even say the word suicide without crying. Literally crying. I couldn't say it. And it was probably 16 years after Matt died, I got invited to speak at a fundraiser. And as we are taping this right now, there are a lot of fundraisers going on through the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. I got involved with those folks. And they do these wonderful things called these Out of the Darkness walks. So I go do the walk. I raise pretty good amount of money for them for this particular walk. And they said, hey, can you speak on the topic? I've never done that before. I don't think I'm ready for prime time with this story. I never wanted to speak about it ever again. So there I was. I found myself speaking at this fundraiser, and I totally bombed. I sat down, I'm like, ugh, that was awful. And this woman comes up to me. She goes, "You need to tell that story more often." I'm like, that was the one and done show. We are done. I'm never talking about it again. And we make plans, and God laughs. So sure enough, I got a call from somebody who saw me speak at that event and said, "Hey, can you come speak at our school?" All right, I'll try it. Maybe this is how I help people. Prior to this, I was doing some anonymous help when I lived in Chicago, working on the suicide prevention lifeline. And I love that because I was answering the phones. Now it's the number is 988, but back in the day it was 1-800, 273 talk 8255. You had to spell it out. It's 988, and it should be in everybody's phone. It's an easy number to remember. So I was answering the calls, but it was anonymous. Nobody knew I was doing it. I would leave my house at night and come back later. My shift was from 8 to 12. And even my boys didn't know. Just daddy had something to go do. Daddy had work to do, and I'd leave. But this was the first time I was really front and center. My name is Dennis Gillan, and here's my story. And a lot of us, Linda, a lot of us have stories that we sure as heck would not have written for ourselves. It's not the script I thought I was going to follow my life, right? In my head when I was 12, I was going to be an NFL quarterback, like every kid, or a fireman or police, whatever you name it. That's what I thought. I didn't think I'd be a mental health advocate, talking about suicide prevention, but here we are. Or as I say to my friends, here we effing are. I'm trying not to curse, but here we are, we're in it. And so I spoke that time and I bombed there. So I'm 0 for 2. I spoke a third time, bombed there, but I'm getting better. Only cried half the time. It's getting better. And then the third time I spoke, I am a man of faith. And before I went on, these people, God bless them, they said, "Let's pray for our speaker." And I'm sitting in the hallway going, "Yeah, I kind of need a prayer right now because I'm about to soil myself." The room was packed. This was at Charleston Southern University, and the room they gave me, they gave this program, held about 220 people. I remember looking at that when I went in. I said, "Wow, 220. We're lucky if we get that," right? But it was also mandatory. It was part of convocation. They had to be there. So the room filled up, and it kept filling up, and it kept filling up. And I'm in the hallway, like freaking out. Like there was about 300 kids in this thing. Now they're in the aisles. Like if the fire marshal came by, it's a hazard. We're shutting it down. That's when they said, "Let's pray for our speaker." I'm like, "All right, please do." And then I don't know what happened. Well, I sort of know what happened. Uh, God enters the chat, and I was on fire that night. I'm like, you know what? I've got nothing to lose. It's my story. I can tell it, and I'm going to tell it. I'm going to tell it with a little passion. I'm going to try to inspire at least one person out of the 300 that are sitting there that suicide is not an option. Now, I joke with some of my friends, we're Americans. We love our options. You can't tell me that's not an option. It's an option. All right, let me paraphrase that. Suicide is not a good option. It's still an option for you, but it's a horrible one. Trust me. As a survivor of suicide loss times 2, it's an awful option. What a really good option would be live and see what happens. Could it get worse? Yeah. Could it get better? Yeah. Let's see. And so I spoke there, and then it was on the ride back. I brought a friend of mine who happened to be a pastor. So I was like, "Oh, this guy does professional speaking every Sunday. He speaks." I'm like, "How'd I do? Padre, how'd I do, Reverend Pastor?" And he goes, he looked at me and he said, "Dennis, you need to keep going." He goes, "I was in the back and not one person was on their phones. And this is college kids." He goes, "I don't know what it is, but you just got to keep going." I sort of wanted to hear that. There's a part of me that sort of wanted to hear, "You know what? You kind of suck. You shouldn't quit your day job. Eh, Nice try. You did it 3 times. Yeah, that's enough. And go home." But he said, "Now you got to keep going." So here we are, Linda. We're probably 13th year doing this. Um, Started a foundation, the Half a Sorrow Foundation. It's what I do full time. My miseries become my mission. And I say this a lot to myself, like, I'm a reluctant warrior and I'm fighting suicide prevention. I'm a reluctant warrior, but that still makes you a warrior. Did I want to pick this fight? No. Did I want to be in this battle? No. But guess what? I'm in it. And once you enter that arena, you're in. So I'm in it. So that's what I do now, full time, dedicated to my brother Mark, my brother Matthew, full time suicide prevention, 24/7, 365. And here it is. We're taping this on a Saturday, and tomorrow we're talking suicide prevention Saturday. Tomorrow I'm going to a church and I'm talking suicide prevention on a Sunday, and then I'm leaving for a camp to do suicide training Monday, Tuesday. So it's full time, and it's extremely rewarding. I'm not complaining because I sleep well at night, because every now and then I penetrate the armor of the person who's in the audience. Every now and then the message gets in, and every now and then they reach out to me and go, you know what? I didn't want to go to your talk, but I'm glad I did. And that keeps me going. That's all I need. A little morsel, little nugget. Just one out of the 300 says, you know what? I appreciate it. And then off we go. So there it is. It's my elevator. I guess everyone's like, that's my elevator speech, but it's a very tall building. It's a very slow elevator. That's what I do.
I absolutely am in admiration of everything that you said. And it's because you said like 3 things that really spoke to me. I don't really want to talk about this anymore. And so you didn't. But then you really felt called to be able to help personally. So you did it behind the scenes. And you didn't necessarily tell anyone. Well, here you are today, going into places and spaces where you're talking about the option of living and seeing what happens. And you're sharing how you didn't pick this to happen. You didn't pick this work. You would rather have your brothers here today and not talk about them as being the past. They still are. And so, sometimes these experiences that we don't choose and we are in and we're called to do things that, like you had mentioned, gives you the fulfillment to move forward from this, because a lot of things could have happened. You mentioned early on that you were heavily drinking when this happened. You were trying to finish college. Well, when you're in the middle of those types of things and you're looking for outside substances or other ways to get away from the pain, that's a human thing that happens. And putting the awareness that these things could get better or worse, and staying in it, even as the survivor of the people that have not moved forward. Because you had mentioned that not only do you want the prevention, people finding fulfillment, finding that they have options to live and see what happens, but then there is, in some cases, that postvention where you can't control that. You can't control someone choosing to live and see what happens or not. I've personally been in a space where the person chose not. And so, it changed the way that I look at my life every day. And so when you said live and see what happens, anything that might be difficult in my life or hard or whatever, I just want to see what's going to happen and know that any one thing is not going to be in that space of permanency. It can change. I can choose. I have hope. I can move forward. And so people such as yourself that are out there sharing that message, you know what? You don't bomb in my book at all. If you go on this stage and maybe you don't have the right words in the moment, or maybe you are brought to tears because of that love that you have, and it's coming out in the form of not having dry eyes in the moment, well, then that's okay. And that's another message in itself, that you can experience these feelings, that you're human, that there are paths and things that you can do. And when somebody's sitting in that audience who may be feeling much like you did, I didn't really want to come, but I'm here. I'm so glad I did. You win every time from that one person.
Well, back to my spirituality, God and I wrestled at one point. As you can imagine, you walk behind the caskets of two brothers. We're not really on good terms at that moment. We're on good terms now. And to God be the glory. You know, I always search, like you said there, Linda, I always hope I say the right thing. And I pray hard that the words come out of my mouth. And, so far, so good. But I give the audience credit for showing up too. A lot of credit, because it's not the sexiest topic. I remember I spoke at a Rotary Club in a cute little town here. I live in South Carolina, Blythewood, South Carolina. They had a Rotary Club meeting early in the morning, and this old guy came up to me, and he said, when I saw the agenda this morning, I didn't want to come. Because you seriously, you put the word suicide on a flyer, people run from it. Like, well, who wants to go to breakfast and listen to this guy? But I've been blessed with this presentation format that's, it ends on it's a real message of hope, and we go over warning signs or risk factors. Like, come on, that happened. Yeah, I'm not going to dwell on my brothers. That happened. We get them out of the way early. So back to this guy, he's sitting there, and at the end of the meeting, shook my hand. He goes, I didn't want to come today, but I'm glad I did. That's an actual quote from a guy. And I'm like, all right, I'm glad you showed up too. Especially from an older man, because there's generational differences here. My dad couldn't talk about my brothers. He couldn't talk about it. I barely can. And I want everyone else to, younger generations to be really cool talking about mental health and all that other stuff. So we don't have these issues. So hopefully, as time goes on, we get better talking about mental health. And I talk myself, I have a job in suicide prevention. Like, we don't need you, Dennis. Guess what? We're at 0. Sweet. A man can dream. But currently the numbers, and I keep pointing over to this other screen because they're haunting me. The numbers are heading in the wrong direction right now.
Yes, working yourself out of the job is exactly where you want to be. And when we had talked before today about the things that we wanted to bring to the audience and to discuss, we were talking a lot about how life changes and you navigate all the different stages. And when you're doing that, you may or may not feel as connected with yourself and where you're headed. And that there is, I see the opportunity to go in for the prevention, which is to, how does a man go about finding connection that leads to fulfillment? So he's not even going down that downward spiral space. What are some things that you usually recommend or bring up as practices to find that? Because I think that nobody wants to go down the downward spiral, but you find yourself at that. And so it's like, what do I do today to get out of that? And sometimes it means reaching out to someone to talk, but there's more than that.
Oh, there's a lot more than that. And one thing I did, and all I could do is point to myself sometimes, because I can't, my life as an example. I mentioned my older brother, Mark, and I used to get, a negative coping skill was I drank, did drugs, tried to numb the pain. When Matthew died, this is one of the smartest things I've ever done. When Matthew died, I got hammered the night before the funeral. That was not very smart, but I went to the funeral hungover. Every time I cry, and I cry a lot, every time I cry, I get a headache. I don't know, it's a physiological response. I just get a headache. And then I got to go lay down, but it wears me out. But that's all right. This is my body saying, go lay down, sleep it off. So at Matt's funeral, I was hungover and headache, crying like awful. And then on the drive home, I lived in Carlisle, Pennsylvania at the time, and had a 4-hour car ride home. I'm like, what am I going to do with my life? And I'm happy to report that I have not had a drink of alcohol since we buried Matthew. And there's a logical science reason behind that. Was one, alcohol is a depressant, and I was extremely depressed. And I'm not the smartest guy in the world. I'm really not the sharpest tool in the shed. I'm as sharp as a marble, but I knew that much. My head was way up my rear end, but I like, you know what? you probably shouldn't drink. This is me talking to myself. You probably should. Uh, you're not good at it anyway, and it's a depressant, and you could barely get out of bed. So let's part ways for a while. And then I made a deal with God about getting, having a child. We were having trouble at the time, and then Martin shows up, my son, and I don't go back to alcohol. Part of a deal. I'm a loyal man. A deal's a deal. And I made a deal with God. I said, if we get pregnant, I'll never drink again. Martin is, 28. I'm sober 29 years. Do the math. It worked. I don't recommend that. I don't, arm wrestling God. I don't recommend that at all. But I don't recommend drinking while you're depressed. Let's take God out of the picture. But there's a scientific reason why you shouldn't drink when you're bummed out. It'll just exacerbate the situation. And since we're on the men's room, I'll be honest, I didn't know which dentist was going to come out when I was drunk. The happy-go-lucky, which most of the time I was, but every now and then this evil little jerk would show up, and he would hate everybody. F you, he drunk, like, oh, geez, we all know that guy. Every now and then, like, all right, cut him off. I didn't want that guy to show up ever, because I'm kind of scared of that guy. Because after the 2 traumas I had, I'm like, what is that guy going to look like now? He's in my, subconscious lifting weights right now. He's pretty bulked up. I don't want him out. So sobriety has kept all those folks at bay and let Dennis be Dennis. And that was a good move. And then the other good move, Linda, was I went and saw a professional counselor. So those 2 pillars right there, just being sober and then going to see a mental health professional, which in your intro, I think it's important to point out that you and I are not mental health professionals. I'm an advocate. That's a big difference. I was an accounting major in school. I'm not having anyone sit down on my couch and tell me their problems. I'm just trying to be an advocate and get people to talk about the problems. And that's why our foundation is called Half a Sorrow, because if you literally, if you share your sorrow, you cut it in half. It's an old Swedish proverb. A shared joy is a double joy. A shared sorrow is half a sorrow. And it took me forever to get there, but here we are.
I'm really glad that you, again, shared that thing that we all need to know, which is when we're in that depressed state, we don't want to be adding to it, because you cannot think clearly. You cannot have clarity of focus on anything, and it will make it worse when you add that to it. And what would you say if there was a man out there and he's thinking, I need to get support. I really don't want to be sitting in, an office, a counseling session, a psychiatry session, but I want to get some help. And they're kind of like, they know they need to do it, but they're on the fence of resistance to wanting to actually pick up the phone and dial and go do it. Is there anything that they could consider doing before they might try that experience? I mean, because I know that happens a lot. Then there's that I want to go and see a therapist and get help at camp. And then there's no, I don't need anybody. I can do it on my own. I'm not going to put myself in that spot with those people in that group. I'm not like them. There's a lot of resistance around that. So their problems keep going because they're resisting wanting to go into a space that could help them. So what would you say to someone that's, on that other side?
On the other side, well, there's stuff you could do for yourself right off the bat. Men, rugged individualism, we tend to I got this, and 99% of the time we don't have this. So let's just pretend you have it. So one thing I would do is, just try to quit drinking. We talked about, and there are groups for that. The AA, Celebrate Recovery, just try it. Now, I got shocked into it. I didn't use any system. I got shocked into it, and I like it. So, no, I love sobriety. I like partying. I love sobriety. And there's a big difference for the men out there. If after this podcast, I go home and I tell my wife, honey, I love you. And she says, Dennis, I like you. You could feel the difference right there. There's a big difference. I love sobriety. So there's a lot of stuff you can do self-care wise that you should do. Proper, sleep, underrated. Get sleep, nutrition, workout. There's all this stuff we know we got to do. Now I feel like a broken record, like one of those motivational speakers. Be the best version of yourself. But when you're depressed, it's hard to do that. It's super hard to do that. These guys, I love these guys. I lose gigs to them all the time. I'm speaking I lost one guy was speaking about build your brand. Build your brand. I could barely get out of bed. Don't tell me about building my brand. So just take care of yourself. And I love that, every guy has probably seen that speech about making your bed. Just make your bed, do simple things, one or two positive things. One of the things when I was in the throes of depression that was vital after Matthew died, one of the things my ex-wife used to say to me when she was going to work and I was home for a while, I had a very generous employer said, hey, come back when you can. You know, it took about 2 weeks to get my head out of my rear end. But she would always say, if you can get up before noon, that would be great. Before, if you get out of bed by noon, that'd be awesome. So 11:59, I would try to roll out because I'm super bummed out and let my boots hit the ground and get out of bed. So take the little victories like that. So if I looked over at the clock and it was 11:59, I'm like, all right, I added a minute to my day. So go easy on yourself. I think that one of the things I always say, especially to men, Linda,
Mhm.
I had two boys. If one of my boys fell down, I'd pick them up when they were little. Oh, it's okay. You're just learning how to walk. You could do better. It's okay. As you get older and you start running, it'll be easier. Why don't we talk to ourselves like that? Why don't we treat ourselves like a kid? And I really have tried this and in practice, because when we trip or stumble or fall, we are brutal to ourselves. Dennis, you effing a-hole. I can't believe you did that again. You're such a loser. These are, you could hear in your head, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm just crushing myself. That's why when a man or a woman does anything wrong, nobody, if they have a conscience, nobody can say anything to them they haven't said to themselves that's like 10 times worse. Like people could blast you out of the water and say, you know what, bring it on. In my head is like this voice that's 10 times worse than yours. So I have tried to turn that voice off, Linda, and try to treat myself like a child. It's one of the best pieces of advice I ever got from a counselor is like, treat yourself like a child. Literally this morning, I was playing tennis, trying to get, that's my mental health therapy. Just going to hit this ball. All I got to do for an hour is hit this ball. I didn't even bring my phone. It was kind of neat. I left my phone at home and I thought about turning around to go get it. I'm like, nope. I just need to go hit this tennis ball. And I suck at tennis. I suck, but I beat people all the time that are better than me because when I'm walking back to the baseline, I treat myself like a child. I don't beat myself up if I miss a shot or overhead, which is I don't have a good overhead. Usually I miss. I don't walk back there going, you suck, you suck, you suck, you suck. I literally walk back to the baseline. All right, Dennis, not your best shot. You got better ones. Just keep plugging away. I'm literally talking to myself like that. And I do better on the tennis court than I do in life. I'm really good on the tennis court. That's why I beat people that should smoke me. I, I frustrate the heck out of people that are way better than me because I'm like, all right, you got this, and just keep throwing it back over there. It's horrible, my tennis game, but the ball keeps coming back. And I have to figure out, I have to take that tennis court analogy, parlay it into life. All right, Dennis, not your finest moment. That wasn't your greatest meeting. You said some things you shouldn't have said. Let's keep going. You're better than that. And it's that positive voice in my head. Treat yourself like a child. Someone said that to me. I'm like, dang, where was that when I was 15?
I absolutely love that piece of advice because it kind of, in my mind, does two things. It's kind of like a mantra. So you're going to talk about yourself in a positive way, which the brain hears. Positive or negative, the brain's going to hear that negative. It's going to, go forward. So let's be positive with our words. Let's treat ourselves with compassion like we do children. And, what you had said about going out and beating the other people at the tennis, because you just were just going with the flow. You were flexible to the situation. You could be curious and open, and you weren't like thinking, I must win, to be good and valuable and fulfilled. I have to go out and beat these people. You're like, no, I'm just going to feel good about the experience of going to get to play and play how I can. And you opened up the space to be able to move through that in a powerful way, in an empowering way. And so I really appreciate you telling this story, because through stories that we tell of our experiences, when they're relatable and they're easy to picture, they can help us to see those options that we're talking about. I was in a similar space not that long ago, and what came apparent to me was the story that somebody else had put together. They did it so visually that I couldn't but see that, oh my gosh, just smack myself in the forehead, oh my gosh, I needed to be doing this a long time ago. And I'm like, now that I know, I have this awareness that, we're going to talk to what we want and stop talking about what we don't want. And then we're going to be in places and actions where the environment, God is going to respond to us in the way for what we want. And we're not going to sit there and focus and resist all the things that we don't want, because the moment you do that, that's what starts happening to you.
Exactly. It's the inner voice is so important. And you mentioned the inner voice. I read this study somewhere that if I say, Dennis, you suck in my head, that's one thing. If I say, Dennis, you suck out loud, it's like twice as worse, 2 times, it's way worse psychologically if I say it out loud, because then I hear it inside and outside. So be kind to yourself, give yourself grace. And I'm talking to myself while I'm saying this, because there's still times I beat myself up, mostly about, how I treat others, and especially my lovely wife. And just got to give myself grace.
Exactly. When you can give yourself grace, you can forgive yourself for things. Well, then it makes it easier to do the same to other people. So I'm trying to think of where I want to go from here, because there's so many things that we could speak to about this topic. Do you have a thought of where we could take our conversation, as we've been talking about the self-care and well-being, and really finding those threads to fulfillment? I kind of want to keep going down that line. We talked about, talking good to ourselves and a positive voice. What about like having protected time for ourselves? I mean, that's another area I don't know if you're familiar with.
Oh, absolutely. I follow that under self-care. What are you doing for you? And there are people that give, and I'm going to throw the men under the bus. It's mostly women. Women do everything, but they give. I know some guys that do that. And what are you doing for yourself? And I often ask that too for friends of mine. They're going through something, like, what are you doing for your head? Because you can't pour from an empty cup. That's a classic old, psychology. Your counselor will say that at least once or twice, over the course of a year. You can't pour from an empty cup. What are you doing to fill your cup up? So it's important. And unfortunately, sometimes men pick some things that aren't, I'd say, positive factors. We identify a lot, and just speaking generalities, with our profession. Work is us, that becomes our identity. And it's really not, because we all know, if you've ever been in the workforce and one day they're going through a reduction in force and you get the phone call, guess what? It wasn't who you were. I was Dennis Gillan before the phone call. I'm Dennis Gillan after the phone call. Yeah, I happen to work for that company. But sometimes men identify a lot. They put a lot of their identity into their profession. And I would say put more of your identity into the person you are. I'm very fortunate, because I'm not gonna say I got lucky, because it's not luck. It took me 5 or 6, close to 5 decades to figure out my purpose in life. And I didn't want to do suicide prevention. I'm telling you, I did not want to do it. I came into this thing kicking, screaming. Everything I touched turned to crap. I was I went to go work for this company. I thought, this is it. Everybody's making millions except Dennis. I'm going to, there's a startup. Someone's going to buy us out. That startup crashed and burned. It was awful. I thought that was the golden ticket. I'm always looking for that golden ticket. And everything I touched got stripped away from me, including my first marriage of 25 years. So if we're going to touch on a man topic, if any man out there is going through a divorce, you better check your psyche, because that felt like a death. That marriage, I did not want it to end. She did. And it's not a democracy, 1-1 or a tie. No, if someone wants out, they want out, be it male or female. That thing's done. That marriage is done. And I found myself in an extremely lonely place, moved from a big house to a small apartment where I live now in Greenville, South Carolina. I changed towns. I might as well move to China, because I moved an hour and a half away, which means all new friends, and that's okay. That was intentional, believe it or not. Linda, I wanted, at that point, I was so low, I wanted to change my people, my place, and my things. Now, I didn't run away from my family, because my boys were up here where I live now. I was going towards something, not full. You know, if I would have ran, you know, if I would have moved to Kansas where I knew nobody, that would have been different. I moved to a town an hour and a half away where my kids were. One went to Furman, one went to Clemson. That's why the shirt I have on today. So they're in the upstate of South Carolina. So I was going closer to my boys. So that's good. But it really was a whole new start. And if any man out there is going through divorce, I get it. It feels like a death. When Mark died, I felt terrible. When Matthew died, I felt terrible. And when it was, you know, I learned that I'm getting a divorce, I felt terrible. And that terribleness all felt the same. Awful. I couldn't distinguish between one or the other. It felt like a death, and it is a death. It's a death of relationship. So, tip for the day: if any man out there is going through a divorce, and you happen to be friends with them, ask them, are they suicidal? Ask them that question, because that's a tough one. Going through a divorce is tough. And the only time someone asked me this one time, it was a newspaper reporter. She goes, I didn't even expect it. She goes, have you ever been suicidal? You know, I buried two brothers. Like, have you? You know, this is the unhappy trilogy. Am I about to fulfill it? She asked me that. And I said, the only time it ever popped into my head was when I found out my ex-wife was being unfaithful to me. And that's where the divorce came in. And I found myself in a car with my hands shaking. I was so mad. My hands were shaking. I was like, crying, shaking, and it popped in my head. Now, you all know what I do for a living. I'm a suicide prevention mental health advocate. And I'm sitting there going, how did you get in here? Like in my, like, how did that thought even, you know, get through my barricade, my defense mechanism? It just shows that I'm human. And as quickly as that thought came in, Linda, I chased it out. And with positive factors. First things I thought of, my two boys. First thing, Brennan and Martin would be crushed. Don't do it. My mom and dad were still alive. Don't do it. They cannot bury another brother. Don't you dare do it. And that's all those protected things. And it's mostly people. It wasn't stuff like, oh, Dennis, that really nice car you have. Who's going to drive it? It wasn't things. It wasn't, you know, that big house you have. Who's going to buy it? It wasn't that either. It was the people that in my life that mattered the most. It was the kids. It was the friends, family, my sisters. And that thought went out. It came in one ear and quickly went out the other one. But I was still like, how did you get in here? It's this thing called life. It just proved that I'm human. And in the suicide prevention business, we have lost some good advocates over the years because they're human, and it got in there. So I passed the test. That was a rough one. And every story I have has to have a happy ending. I was lonely, depressed, big house, small apartment. One day, here's a plug for church. I was walking out of this church. I was church shopping. I had to start a whole new life up here in Greenville. And I walked by this woman and I said, on your right. That's all I said to her. I was trying to get past her on the sidewalk. I said, on your right. And we started talking, and well, we got married. We talked, and afterwards we met. The next day we went out to lunch, and I wasn't looking for it. She wasn't looking for it. She'd gone through a divorce. I've gone through a divorce, and now we're happily married, and she's the best thing that ever happened to me, period. So happiness in the darkest place is possible. Again, the reason I got remarried is because I decided to stay here and see how it played out.
Wow, I love that you brought that up, because I've been wondering, I've met several suicide prevention advocates, and I was wondering, you know, does doing the work and revisiting the situation impact a person when they actually become in a dark place, knowing that somebody has left? And because, you know, when you're surrounded by all of that, you are sharing the positive. But what I like that you shared, that I'm human, and I actually had that thought. But at least from the work that you did, or not did, that you're doing, that you could like, okay, this is what I'm feeling right now. I acknowledge I'm human. And you speak of, you know, changing people, places, and things. But so when you change people, places, and things, then you put yourself in a place, a situation, or with people that can become that, see what happens. And so having that hope there is very helpful. And you know, one of the things that I know, I do offer coaching, and in that work, there's times where coaches need the coaches. So I'm thinking advocates need to talk to other advocates, because things are going to come up in the work. Somebody's going to touch you in a certain way that might impact you. Somebody could, be in a really tough space, or you could be in your own tough space as you're doing this positive work. And so I think it's really important that people have each other.
It's funny you said that, because right before this podcast, I was making my plane reservations. I was debating whether to go to this meeting. I said I need to go. It's a group called Linked by Legacy. Linked, Linked by Legacy. And our legacy, it's a group of folks who do suicide prevention work. And we're meeting out in Utah.
Mhm.
And I was like, I don't need to go to that. And, you just reinforced I do need to go to that. I literally put the plane ticket on hold right before we got on. Like, I probably should go to that meeting and be around people that are in a similar boat, trying to do similar things, but in different regions. So thank you for bringing that up, because I am going to book that ticket.
Oh, I'm so glad that I touched you in that way. I only bring it up because I was in this space where I was coaching somebody and something happened that I wasn't aware was going to happen. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm the worst coach ever. I triggered this person into this space, and oh my gosh. So I ended up speaking to a coach, and they said, no, they just were having a moment. Pay attention. It'll probably change tomorrow. And it did. And so that's why I was thinking about this work. When you're knee deep into it and you meet those people that don't want to come, but they're there, they need to have support, and you can't support everybody even doing this work. And so there's that giving of yourself, your time, your energy, the message, and then setting those boundaries on where you come in and where you would suggest for a person to turn to. There's a time to listen and be there for that person, and then there's a time that you extend the directions to the resources. And that's why I wanted to kind of bring that up.
Well, thank you for doing that. And you brought up an important point. My male ego says that anybody who hears me speak will never die by suicide. And I had to brace myself. At one point I said, listen, Dennis, one day you're going to find out that somebody who heard you speak died by suicide. And sure enough, it happened at a fraternity event. I spoke, and then 4 months later, I found out that somebody that was in that audience died by suicide, and it crushed me. I'm like, I like to think I could save everybody. Just hear me out. And there was a lot of issues. I called the organization up, and they said, hold on, we're just getting to the bottom of it. And there was a lot going on there. It was a sexuality thing, transgender, the fraternity was great. They accepted that person as they were. When he went home, or when they went home, they didn't get accepted the way they thought they should. And it was complicated, as it all is. And often with the suicide, it's not one thing, it's multiple things. It's layers. Usually in the younger folks, if you want to talk generational, they do say it's impulsive. Girlfriend broke up with me. I'm 15. It's the end of the world. You know what? I've been there. It ain't the end of the world. There's other girls. But as you know, the men part of this, the 80%, as we get older and the ages 45 to 64, and then 65 and higher, those numbers are off the chart for men. So we tend to think about the kids in this world I live in suicide prevention. And it's a child suicide, and we've heard them as low as 8, 9, 10, 11, awful. Because there's that years of life that's lost. Unbelievable. Someone dies at 10, you could live to 80. We just lost 70 years of that person's life. Terrible. Who knows? They could have cured cancer. We don't know. They're gone. So when you get to 45, like, that guy had 20 years left. You know what? It could have been the 20 most productive years of your life. So we got to watch our older folks too. So on the men's room, check on the older dudes in your life. Sometimes when I speak to fraternity guys who are young, I'll say, you know what? I need you to go home and check on your dads, and then check on grandpa, check on everybody, and check on your happy friends, because maybe something going on inside there.
That's a wonderful ask, to check in on your younger, your older, everyone in between, because there is no face of what, depression, suicide ideation looks like. You don't know. if we're not checking in on people just because we care about them in our lives, then those things are big, going on undetected, because not everyone reaches out and says, hey, I need someone to talk to, or things aren't going right with me. Sometimes they're kind of hoping that somebody would care enough to observe it and to actually be that one person to pick up that phone, or to have a coffee time, or go out and play some ball, or whatever the thing is that you can connect with the person. That's so important.
You nailed it. Even that simple thing like coffee time. When I moved to that apartment building and we started this program, I call it the Camo Hat Club. It's camouflage hats, camo, C-A-M-O. Every guy should have a camo hat club. This group I'm in meets every first Thursday of the month at this one place for breakfast. And at the end of the breakfast, because I'm in the group, we say, hey, how's everybody's mental health? Everyone doing good? You all right? Everyone's good? That's a simple question. And this is not a hard program. I'm not, I don't want to, have officers and Robert's rules or principles, whatever. We don't need that. We just want to break bread and have a good time and talk. And it's the first Thursday of every month. It's here in Greenville, but I need other guys to start their own. And we literally have a text chain, and this is how guys are. We're hilarious. We don't organize very well. We have a text chain, about 18 potential guys that come. Not all of them come, maybe 4 or 5, the regulars, and then every now and then someone else jumps in. But the Wednesday before the Thursday, someone goes, hey, is that breakfast tomorrow? And we go, oh yeah, see you tomorrow. That's as informal as it gets. It's so low maintenance. But I look forward to it every month. It is in my calendar every month, first Thursday. Go, go, go. And it's awesome. So I think everybody out there needs to have a camo hat club. And ladies, don't be offended because, we have that red hat society. You have your own groups, but men need it. And the reason we chose camouflage, the camo hat, was because men tend to camouflage their emotions. They could be having the worst day ever. And you say, how you doing, buddy? Fine. I'm doing fine. Oh, bull crap to that. So we need that contact. And it's based on a simple principle. A stick alone can be broken by a child, but a stick in a bundle cannot be broken. Men need to bundle up, period.
I absolutely, hands down, applaud and love the idea of having that camo club that you just mentioned. Now, is that something that is like a unique to your area or unique to you that you started, or is it an organization that's nationally recognized, even though it's on the like you said, informal basis? I'm curious.
It's totally informal, but we did one thing at the Half a Star Foundation. I want this thing to go national, so we trademarked it, like the marketing geniuses we are. We trademarked it. Like, are we going to monetize this thing? Hell no. We want to see it go national. We want to see men and I don't want to make it an old men's group sitting in IHOP talking about the size of our prostates. We want young guys to do it, because I could have used this when I was a younger fella, because my life got taken over by the kids and school and all that and work. And I could have used a group that met every once a month and said, hey, breakfast, hey, how's everybody doing? Like, oh my gosh, I can't keep up with these knuckleheads. They got practice, whatever problems I was going through at that time of my life, I could have used a hand. So that's what I'd like to see it happen. So Linda, by word of mouth in this podcast, I like to see more camo hats, camo hat clubs. I like to see them spring up and start doing this thing. And then again, we're putting on our new website. We're going to have like little instructions. It's so simple, guys. It's just pick a day, keep it consistent. We picked the same restaurant. We actually kept it going during COVID. We met outside. You could do that in South Carolina. You can't do it everywhere, but we met outside for a while, and probably we're on we were trying to think about this the other day. We're on year 4 or 5, and I needed this group. When this group started, I was single, living in a really small apartment. How small was that apartment? When I put the key in too far, I broke the back window. That's how small it was. I'm talking tiny. And the walls were coming in on me. And I met this guy downstairs one day in my apartment and said, we need to have breakfast one day. And we did. And that's how this thing started. It started basically me wanting to get out of my apartment.
Well, I know one thing's for sure. here on the men's room, we support community building. We support having that space where men can go. And you just given a prototype that you have, that you're marketing. And I love the fact that you're homegrown, you're starting, and that you want to expand the groups. And so I want to know if a man is looking to start one of these groups, just as you have, and they want that easy prototype that they can follow, so it is not something that they have to worry about the formality. It just is, and it can be as simple as, hey, are we meeting next week? That's simple. How can they get that information so that they could work with you to get that information and start their own chapter or I guess camo club in their own city space?
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely. They get a hold of me at dennis@halfasara.org and I'll walk them through it. And we have some guidelines, guidelines. We have some suggested recommendations. Guys don't like rules. There's little rules. Nah, just these are recommendations. And it's funny you say that, Linda, because I knew this was going to happen. I spoke to a group of HR professionals, and human resources, that profession tends to attract a high percentage of females. I don't know whatever it is, but in the room I was in, there were more women than there were men. And I was speaking. And there's something in this talk for everyone, by the way, because I keep harping on the men's thing, but women have more attempts, 3 to 4 times more attempts suicides. We're all in this together. So I'm in this room and I knew this was going to happen. And this guy is loved. He doesn't know how much he's loved, but this woman got a hold of me and said, how do I start one of these for my husband? Because he needs it. So what I really need is men to get off their ass. It's the simplest thing ever. You go have breakfast with a couple buddies. There are some days there are 3 guys there. There are some days, one time there was 2 guys there, but there's another day there were 8 guys there. It just varies month to month. Life comes at you, but pick a date, pick a spot, and make it happen. And keep adding to that list. Our list is probably 18 to 19 people now. We just keep throwing names out there. Hey, I met this guy. Throw them on there. If they come, they come. If they don't, they won't. No. One guy moved away. He said, can you remove me from the list? And by the way, I miss you guys. That's fine. You're off the list. We miss you too. But it's really so simple and it's so needed.
I'm so happy that you're really doing this, and you're right. Women will throw things together. We love bringing people together. We love community. And I mean, the men's room is very much like what you described. I put the infrastructure there, invite wonderful guests like you to come in and to really talk to the issues. And by you stepping into the men's room, we're showing that a lot of things that we can do in life are easy. It's just a matter of getting off your butt, picking a date, showing up, and then just making it so easy that people can do it. And you talked about you want to do it, and not everyone's an organizer, but if you create the space, people will come if you're doing something
You do.
meaningful.
And you need one little spark. One spark creates this fire. I recently did another one. This is a classic. I went to school in West Virginia University, and when school was getting tough, now I look back at how tough school was. I'd trade that for a heartbeat, in a heartbeat. Oh, college was so hard. It wasn't that hard. We made it hard. We used to go camping at this place. We used to call it Rosie's. And I recently organized a trip of guys who used to love going out there. It was a weird group of guys. It was my fraternity, but it was an eclectic group. It was like, it wasn't all the cliques. It was, you like to go to Rosie's, come with us. So we went camping, gosh, it had to be 3 weeks ago. And I'm standing where we camped and I'm sitting there in my head going, Dennis, when was the last time you were here? It was 38 years ago. I graduated in 1985. It was 38 years ago. I went camping at that spot. And it was so good to have everyone together. And if you could have seen the Zoom call we had before we left, it was the most disorganized Zoom call ever. I hung up the phone and my wife goes, are you still going? I was like, I think we are. I don't know. It's kind of, no one really took control, and I guess we're just going to go up there. And it was such a guy thing. There was no leader emerged. It was too funny. And sure enough, we got a campsite and everything. It all worked out. 99% of what you worry about never happens. That's why insurance companies make money. And we got there and we had a ball. It was good to see everybody. So.
Well, I'm so glad that we have the opportunity today to talk about prevention, postvention, how we can find fulfillment by finding that time in our day to do the things we want, positive messaging to ourselves, and then, just stepping forward and creating a space to just go do with the other guys. It's that easy. It doesn't have to be difficult. You just want to find a connection. You found it through camping, and it didn't need a bunch of organization. Yeah, it was messy maybe, and you didn't know how everything was going, but everyone made it there, and the people that made it there wanted to be there. So there you go. You just do it.
It was an awesome trip. I spoke to a guy this morning about it. He goes, dude, that was awesome. And I was like, dude, we almost didn't pull it off, but we did.
You did. And so now you're that inspiration for other dudes to go out there and pull it off. And I'm going to support you on that from the men's room. And after we have our ending of our show today, I'm going to take those links that you have so that the men can connect to you to find out more about how they can get their camo club started in their city, in their space.
Well, that'd be awesome because, men need men. And iron sharpens iron. And, I'm not talking about sitting around holding hands. I'm just talking around saying, checking in on each other. How you guys doing? Good. And I'll tell you, a Camel Hat Club, that's true. And I saw the guy this morning. One of our meetings, a guy showed up and he didn't look so good. And we said, bro, what's going on? He said, well, I'm going through a divorce. Little did he know that he sat down at a table. 3 of us already did it. So we're like, all right, come to Papa. What's going on? And we suggested a couple things to him, like, listen, the apartment you're in, I've been there. The walls are going to get tight. You're going to get out of there. So one of my friends was in a hiking club going out with nature. He said, you got to join this hiking club. I said, listen, I play a lot of tennis. They're beginner lessons. Come down there and just do what you got to do. And this morning I was at the tennis center, and who do I see is my buddy now taking a class. And I'm happy to report he was one. There was 2 guys in this class and 8 women. He looked very happy, and he was out there hitting tennis balls. So the Camel Hat Club, I know for a fact worked because I saw this guy show up looking like crap. And then I saw him this morning. He listened to at least one thing we said or suggested, and he was out there with 8 young ladies running around hitting tennis balls. So he looked like a happy guy.
Imagine so. So I would like to say thank you for joining us on the men's room today. And at this time, I want to call on our audience to, if you're watching this episode today, to like and subscribe to our channel. We have several men coming in to share on various topics of interest to men. I'm excited about everyone that's coming in the next 4 months. And we want you to do one other thing. Not only do we want you to like and subscribe and to click on the link to tune in, but if you've got a story, you've got a passion or expertise or something that other men need to hear about, we want you on our show. And so I want you to send me an email and we will get together for a 15-minute meet and greet, and we go from there. It's really, I make it that easy too. As Dennis can tell us, we met over a call, we talked about what we wanted to do, and we're just doing it. So it's really easy, it's really meaningful, and it's really important. And so with that, we will see you next Saturday for another episode of the Men's Room. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.